Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on chapter 198. Chapter 198. For a long time that night, Princess Mary sat by the open window of her room, hearing the sound of the peasants' voices that reached her from the village, but it was not of them that she was thinking. She felt that she could not understand them, however much she might think about them. She thought only of one thing, her sorrow, which, after the break caused by cares for the present, seemed already to belong to the past. Now she could remember it and weep or pray. After sunset, the wind had dropped. The night was calm and fresh. Toward midnight, the voices began to subside. A cock crowed. The full moon began to show from behind the lime trees. A fresh white dewy mist began to rise, and stillness reigned over the village and the house. Pictures of the near past, her father's illness and last moments, rose one after another to her memory. With mournful pleasure, she now lingered over these images, repelling with horror only the last one, the picture of his death, which she felt she could not contemplate even in imagination at this still and mystic hour of night. And these pictures presented themselves to her so clearly and in such detail that they seemed now present, now past, and now future. She vividly recalled the moment when he had his first stroke and was being dragged along by his armpits through the garden at Bald Hills, muttering something with his helpless tongue, twitching his gray eyebrows, and looking uneasily and timidly at her. Even then he wanted to tell me what he told me the day he died, she thought. He had always thought what he said then. And she recalled in all its detail the night at Bald Hills before he had the last stroke, when with a foreboding of disaster she had remained at home against his will. She had not slept and had stolen downstairs on tiptoe, and going to the door of the conservatory where he slept that night had listened at the door. In a suffering and weary voice he was saying something to Tikhon, speaking of the Crimea and its warm nights and of the Empress. Evidently he had wanted to talk. And why didn't he call me? Why did he let me be there instead of Tikhon? Princess Mary had thought, and thought again now. Now he will never tell anyone what he has in his soul. Never will that moment return for him, or for me, when he might have said all that he longed to say, and not Tikhon, but I might have heard and understood him. Why didn't I enter the room? She thought. Perhaps he then would have said to me what he said the day he died. While talking to Tikhon, he asked about me twice. He wanted to see me, and I was standing close by outside the door. It was sad and painful for him to talk to Tikhon, who did not understand him. I remember how he began speaking to him about Liza, as if she were alive. He had forgotten that she was dead, and Tikhon reminded him that she was no more, and he shouted, "Fool!" He was greatly depressed. From behind the door I heard how he lay down on his bed groaning, and loudly exclaimed, "My God!" Why didn't I go in then? What could he have done to me? What could I have lost? And perhaps he would have been comforted and would have said a word to me. And Princess Mary uttered aloud the caressing word he had said to her on the day of his death. "Dearest," she repeated, and began sobbing, with tears that relieved her soul. She now saw his face before her, and not the face she had known ever since she could remember and had always seen at a distance, but the timid, feeble face she had seen for the first time quite closely, with all its wrinkles and details, when she stooped near to his mouth to catch what he said. "Dearest," she repeated again. What was he thinking when he uttered that word? What is he thinking now? This question suddenly presented itself to her, and in answer she saw him before her with the expression that was on his face as he lay in his coffin, with his chin bound up with the white handkerchief. And the horror that had seized her when she touched him and convinced herself that it was not he but something mysterious and horrible seized her again. She tried to think of something else and to pray, but could do neither. With wide open eyes she gazed at the moonlight and the shadows, expecting every moment to see his dead face, and she felt that the silence brooding over the house and within it held her fast. "Dunyasha!" she whispered. "Dunyasha!" She screamed wildly, and tearing herself out of his silence, she ran to the servants' quarters to meet her old nurse and the maidservants who came running towards her. That concludes my reading of chapter 198 of War and Peace. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 198. Swept away together. C-3PO, that Schopenhauerian sage of the Star Wars saga, is known to have lamented, during a particularly trying time, that we seem to be made to suffer. It's our lot in life. This insight is as true in a galaxy far, far away as it is right here on Earth. In 1812 Russia, it's especially true. Mary Bolkonskaya, for example, finds herself frightfully sorrowful in today's chapter. In addition to all her personal suffering, she must also reckon with an ever-advancing foreign invasion on her lands. She has a lot to worry about. Perhaps, however, at least some portion of her suffering is self-inflicted. Nearly the entire chapter is devoted to her rueful reflection over the past. The agony of memory tears at her soul as she considers the fresh death of her beloved father. First, she pictures his helpless body dragged through the garden after having suffered its first stroke. Then she spends an inordinate amount of time dwelling on an episode of her father's final day. She agonizes over his utterance of the word dearest and wrestles with its potential meanings. This leads her to further ruminations on the finality of death and all the sadness that subject brings with it. It's curious to note that Tolstoy, returning once more to this motif of contrasting indifferent nature to involved human passion, supplies a break from all the emotional tumult in this chapter with a small paragraph describing the weather outside Mary's bedroom. Quote, "After sunset, the wind had dropped. The night was calm and fresh. Towards midnight, the voices began to subside. A cock crowed. The full moon began to show from behind the lime trees. A fresh white dewy mist began to rise, and stillness reigned over the village and the house." End quote. It's only natural for Mary to be upset. A loved one has just passed away, after all. There comes a point, however, when our suffering stems not from anything external, but rather from within ourselves. In order for the winds of her mind to drop, and her spirits to be calm and fresh, she must let go of the things, past, present, and future, that cannot be altered. Daily Meditation. Why, then, should we be angry? Why should we lament? We are prepared for our fate. Let nature deal as she will with her own bodies. Let us be cheerful whatever befalls, and stoutly reflect that it is not anything of our own that perishes. What is the duty of a good man? To submit himself to fate. It is a great consolation to be swept away together with the entire universe. Seneca, on Providence. And that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 198 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 199 of War and Peace. I hope you join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.